Some children grow up in houses filled with laughter, but never learn to laugh out loud. Not because they don't know joy, but because they've learned silence is the only way to be allowed to exist. My name is Noel Carter, and in the house I called home, I was nothing more than an uninvited guest. I can't remember the first time I learned to go quiet. Maybe it was the day Mom told me, "Don't speak over your sister." Maybe it was when I brought home a statewide art award and she asked, "Can you even make a living doing that?" Or maybe it was the day I stood by my father's casket, clutching a small folded poem in my hand, one no one asked to hear. I grew up in the southern suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina, where every porch smiles for the 4th of July, where every curtain flutters politely, and every heart learns to lock its real feelings behind the kitchen walls. We were taught how to behave, how to smile just enough, how to say all the right words while never saying the truth. My father, Daryl Carter, was the only person who ever really saw me. He wasn't a man of many words, but when I doodled on napkins at dinner, he'd grin and say, "You've got the kind of eyes that see the world when it's hurting." He wrote that on a sticky note and taped it to my old sketchboard. I still have it, but my father didn't live long enough to see the full painting of my life unfold. A rainy evening. A fatal car crash. I was 13. At his funeral, my mother wrapped her arms around my older sister Brielle and whispered, "We'll get through this together." I stood nearby, gripping my poem, invisible in plain sight. I spent my teenage years like a backstage hand, setting the lights, arranging the props, but never once stepping into the spotlight. Brielle, beautiful, eloquent, never a disappointment, was the lead role in every holiday dinner, every family photo, every dream my mother never got to live for herself. I never hated my sister, but I did wish I could at least be an extra in her story, instead of a ghost in my own. My family never hit me. They just forgot me long enough for me to start believing I was a technical glitch. Mom called it trust when she said, "You're strong, Noelle. I don't worry about you." But trust without presence is the easiest way to abandon a child without feeling guilty. I stayed quiet. I let it all slide until I realized silence doesn't just steal your voice. It convinces you don't even deserve to be heard. I got into Seattle School of Design. Full scholarship. The day I printed out my acceptance letter and laid it on the kitchen counter. Mom glanced at it and said, "Brielle had a chance to go far too, but she chose to stay for family." I didn't argue. I packed my suitcase, slid my sketchbook into the front pocket, taped Dad's sticky note to the inside cover, and wrote the first sentence in my new journal. I will no longer ask for permission to live my own life, because some revenge stories don't need explosions. Sometimes, the loudest rebellion is standing up from the seat they silently assigned you, the nameless one, the one in the shadows, and walking straight out of the script they called family, because not everyone who shares your blood knows how to feed your heart. Silence used to be my armor. Now I lay it down because I'm done living like I'm stuck in a trench. There's a kind of hurt that doesn't come from screaming. It comes from the soft repetition of "I forgot." Not because they couldn't remember, but because they chose not to. Not from the mind, but from the heart. I used to think I was overlooked, but the truth, I was left off the list from the very beginning. I used to believe my mom was just busy, that her forgetting to ask what I ate, how I slept, what I dreamed, was a matter of too much going on. But the truth was, she remembered every little thing about Brielle. And when it came to me, her forgetfulness wasn't accidental. It was curated. When I got into Seattle School of Design with a full scholarship, I thought, this is it. She'll finally see me. I printed 3 copies of the acceptance letter, highlighted my name, the words "full ride," the move-in date, the location. I laid them on the kitchen counter like offerings, like someone placing flowers on an altar. A quiet ritual begging to be noticed. Mom skimmed it, nodded once, then said, Brielle had the chance to study far away too. But she stayed for family. That's what selfless people do. I didn't answer. Because if I did, I was afraid I'd cry. Not because I was weak, but because I'd been holding it in too long. That wasn't a comparison. It was a declaration. In her script, I was a side character, and every time I tried to write a paragraph for myself, she crossed it out in red ink I was never allowed to see. She always called me independent. I used to think it was a compliment. Now I know. It was the label she used, so she didn't have to show up for me. Brielle was the daughter. I was the other one. Brielle belonged. I was the adjustable setting, switched off when inconvenient. At dinner, if I voiced a different opinion, Mom would nod, then turn to Brielle and ask, What do you think, honey? I was present, but never truly included. I used to think I simply wasn't enough. Not pretty enough. Not fun enough. Not good enough at playing the role. One of those betrayal stories no one ever talks about because it doesn't leave bruises, just permanent silence. But I don't think that way anymore. When I packed my suitcase and left Charlotte, I didn't just walk away from my childhood home. I walked away from a version of myself shaped by quiet rejection and constant comparison. I didn't fight back with tears. I fought back by becoming, by existing, unapologetically, without waiting for a stamp of approval. Because now I know, a true infidelity story doesn't always start with romance. Sometimes, it begins when a mother slowly withdraws her love from one child and deposits it fully in another, and calls it parenting. And me, I'm done auditioning for a family that never even wrote me into the script. Not everyone who makes you feel small hates you. Some are just too busy worshiping the image of who they wish you were. To love the soul that's right in front of them, growing silently in the dark. Some houses are full of light, but no one looks you in the eye and really sees you. Some dinner tables have all the right food, but no one ever asks, Are you okay? I lived in a place like that, and even though they called it family, I knew. It was a prison with a roof. When I told my mother I was moving to Seattle, she didn't try to stop me. No tears. No hugs. No, I'll miss you. She just said, It's your choice. But don't forget, Brielle once chose to stay. I didn't say a word, but inside I was screaming. I'm not leaving because I hate this house. I'm leaving because this house never made space for me. I boarded that plane like someone fleeing war-torn ground, not to escape but to survive. I didn't take much. One suitcase, a sketchbook, a worn folder of drawings, and a note from my dad that read, You don't need permission to exist. Seattle didn't greet me with fireworks. My dorm room was tiny, damp spots on the wall, creaky floor. But it was mine, the first door I could lock, the first space where silence didn't mean erasure. I taped my art to the wall with brown masking tape, hung the only picture I had with my father, and I exhaled. I let go of all the breath I'd been holding in at the dinner table back home. Brielle kept texting, Mom's not feeling well. You should call. Why are you being distant? Family is forever. I used to believe that no matter what, you go back to family. But that was before I learned. Not all homes shelter you. Some are built to cage you, with expectations, with comparisons, with the kind of silence that speaks louder than shouting. When Brielle was planning her wedding to Carter, a dermatologist gone TikTok famous, I was invited to design the wedding concept. Not to be a bridesmaid, not to be honored as family, just the graphic designer. I did it anyway. Part duty, part hope that this would be the moment they finally saw me. I designed the invitations, the save the dates, the menus, the mood boards. I didn't sleep properly for a month. No thank you. No mention of my name in any speech, any caption, any "we couldn't have done this without" moment. I thought I was contributing to a celebration. But the truth is, I was paving the way for a show where my name wasn't even on the playbill. That's when I realized this wasn't a family story. This was one of those cheating wife stories. Not in the romantic sense, but the kind where betrayal happens in the place you least expect it. Home. A true infidelity story doesn't always involve lovers. Sometimes it's a mother quietly withdrawing love from one child and investing it entirely in another, and still calling that love equal. And me, I sat on the cold tiles of that family home like a stranger. I realized blood isn't a leash, and kindness isn't a one-way contract. I stopped replying to texts, wrote a letter to my mom I never mailed, moved the wedding files into a folder labeled "Stories Cheating Didn't Break Me." Not because I didn't hurt, but because I chose not to let the pain be my final chapter. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, gave enough, they'd remember me. But then I learned those who build the stage are rarely on the guest list. And some weddings aren't about unity. They're performances designed to spotlight who matters and dim out who never did. Brielle's wedding was held in a lakeside greenhouse where flowers bloom all year like spring was a privilege only the wealthy could afford. I designed everything: fonts, lighting, menus, napkins. I chose beige, pastel olive because Brielle said, "You know what looks sexy without being extra." 3 months of unpaid work. I didn't complain. I thought maybe this time I'd be seen as part of it. But when the formal invitations were sent, my name wasn't on any of them. No bridesmaid, no guest, no seat, no slice of cake, just a tiny line at the bottom. Concept designed by N. Carter. No one outside the family even knew who N. was. I didn't go. I stayed in my Seattle dorm room, watching the live stream from a link one of Brielle's classmates accidentally posted. I saw everything I touched. The backdrop I built. The lanterns I sourced from a tiny workshop in Oregon. The monogrammed B and C. I hand-lettered because Brielle said, "Make it less aerial, more love." I was the uninvited who helped dream the dream. That's the oldest heartbreak in family drama stories. The one who set the table isn't offered a chair. My mother wore purple. She stood with Uncle Carter's family in the group photo. No one asked, "Where's Noelle?" No one turned the camera toward me, sitting alone, with a lukewarm cup of tea and fingers tapping rhythm into my sleeves. I used to think this was an infidelity story. That betrayal meant not being recognized. But it was more than that. It was a family revenge story, but not the movie kind with slammed doors and shouted secrets. This was revenge through absence, the kind where the daughter they tried to erase actually disappeared from their narrative. I didn't send angry emails, didn't post cryptic captions. I did the one thing they feared most. I disappeared from the orbit they controlled. I stopped needing to be mentioned. I built a new stage, one where I write the script, one where I don't need to wait behind the curtain for permission to step forward. Sometimes I still open the wedding files, not to mourn, but to remind myself I created beauty in silence. I was enough, even when no one saved me a seat at the table I helped set, and I moved the entire wedding project into a new folder. Its name, Human Revenge, but make it healing. I used to think pain meant weakness, that if I were strong enough, I'd feel nothing. But then I realized pain is the alarm bell of the heart, telling you something is out of place. Something is wrong. And silence is the real death of the spirit, because nothing screams louder than what's never said. I'll never forget that morning, a week after Brielle's wedding. My mom called, not to ask how I was, but to say one thing. I just want you to know, everyone was really glad you didn't cause a scene. 'Cause a scene, that's what they called my silence. They didn't hear the screaming in my chest. They were just relieved I didn't ruin their perfectly rehearsed parade. I hung up. I smiled, but not out of peace. It was the smile of someone who realized they ran from a fire no one else knew existed. I had been the beam holding that stage together, and now that I pulled away, they called the collapse drama. I started writing. Not poems, not a journal. Truth. Short pieces. Tiny incisions of my childhood. Fragments of family tales I'd once shoved deep into drawers of forgetting. I wrote about the day I realized my mother never hugged me longer than 3 seconds. About the Christmas I made handmade cards for everyone, and they got left beneath the tree unopened. About how I was always the comparison, the shadow that made Brielle look like light. At first, my words shook like a child learning to write, but they grew stronger. Each sentence stitched up a part of me that had once torn open. I didn't write to expose. I wrote to remember I wasn't crazy, wasn't too sensitive, that the pain was real. It had shape. It had color. It had history. People call it revenge, but not the kind that screams in courtrooms. This was burning revenge. Slow, quiet, persistent. Not to destroy anyone, but so I could survive. I printed the pages, put them in a box, didn't send them, didn't post them. Just a reminder that I have a voice, a memory, and the right to keep myself whole, even if they try to carve me out. It rains a lot in Seattle. One afternoon, I sat in a cafe watching people through the window. A child tugged at her mother's hand for a cookie. The mother bent down, wrapped her arms around her. No words, just that hug. I didn't feel jealous. I just saw it clearly. I never had that, and I no longer needed to pretend that I did. I didn't go around calling people out. I didn't air anyone's name. I simply redrew the map of my heart. What was once off limits became living ground. Because in this world, some family betrayal stories are never named, but they leave scars deeper than any vow ever spoken. I don't need them to see me anymore. I see myself, clearly, completely, and still moving forward. Some decisions don't come from anger, they come from suffocation. I didn't cut ties out of hate. I did it because I couldn't breathe in a space where I always had to shrink. Some family ties aren't cords of connection, they're ropes around your neck. And I had to untie mine just to live. I used to believe forgiveness was an obligation. That if someone gave you life and raised you, then no matter how deeply they hurt you, you had to stay, had to understand, had to keep giving them chances. I gave enough to lose myself. My mother's messages still came on holidays, never asking how I was. Just, send money to Grandma, or, Brielle's not feeling well, check in on your sister. The last time I had a fever and ended up in the hospital from burnout, no one in the family knew. Because no one asked. I used to want them to understand. I sent long messages, like short novels, explaining how I felt, hoping for an apology, a moment of acknowledgement. The only reply, you always overthink things. Worse than that, left on read. So I began to cut, not with scissors, but with intentional silence. No more holiday calls. No more replies to empty check-ins. No more sending congratulatory cards for weddings or babies I wasn't part of. I left the family group chat, unfollowed them all on social media. I stopped forcing connection with people who only reached out when they needed something, never just me. I knew some would toss me into their cheating stories, labeling me the ungrateful child, the daughter who forgot her roots. But they didn't live my life. They didn't see me shrink at dinner tables where only one name got to be heard. They didn't know how every time I spoke up, I was labeled disrespectful, too sensitive, causing trouble. So I chose to cut. No drama, no rage, just a quiet, deliberate retreat, a hidden revenge, a reclaiming of my own life with no need for applause. I used the first paycheck from freelancing to move into a small studio apartment. White walls, big windows. I strung up my own lights, lit my own candles, rolled out rugs, placed flowers in jars. On the shelf, I put a small wooden box, holding all the letters I once wrote to my family and never sent. Not to forget, but to remind myself, I lived through that. And now I choose to survive. I told the story to Jess, my best friend, Dominican raised by her abuela, and she said, "Girl, not all family is blood. Some of us choose breath over bloodlines." And I nodded, because sometimes family tales don't end in reunions. Sometimes revenge stories don't explode, they just stop retreating. I'm not a traitor. I just stopped holding up a house that never gave me a roof. And for the first time in years, I breathed. Deep, steady, in air that finally felt like mine. I used to believe that if I was good enough, patient enough, love would heal everything. But some things didn't fall, they were thrown. And when I bent down to gather the pieces of my shattered life, I stopped trying to glue it all back together the way it was. I decided to repaint everything instead. When I was little, I loved ceramics. There was a porcelain crane my mother had brought back from Cuba, ivory white, neck stretched tall. Whenever I was sad, I'd stare at it like it understood everything I couldn't say. One day, when I was 15, Brielle got mad because I painted the wrong color on her dress design. She grabbed the crane and smashed it on the tile. No apology, just a shrug. Oops. I remember how it felt, like my heart cracked alongside it. Not because of the crane, but because I knew some things were never meant to be kept. I brought those ceramic shards with me all the way to Seattle. Not to fix them, but to remind myself I once believed in hands that never intended to hold me. After all the betrayal stories, I stopped searching for the why. I started painting, not on paper, but across my own life. I took a ceramics class in the fall, a small one in Fremont, just 5 people. The instructor taught me how to mold clay, how to center it on the wheel with hands that trembled from old pain. And for the first time in my life, I understood I could create new shapes from what others thought was ruined. I made a small bowl, yellow with a black rim, then a short flower vase, then a plate etched with the words, "Wholeness isn't perfect, it's chosen." When you survive a true infidelity story, when the infidelity stories don't come from lovers but from your own blood, you don't chase the past. You build a new framework, one no one else can pull apart. One weekend, I sold my ceramics at the street market. An old woman bought the etched plate. She looked at me and said, "Seems like you've weathered quite the storm." I smiled, didn't confirm, didn't deny, because she was right. I'd walked through it, and I was still standing. I wrote little cards for each piece I sold, not to gain sympathy, but so that anyone who's walked a similar path would know, what breaks doesn't have to end. Breakage can be the beginning of rebuilding. Seattle winters are cold, but I don't feel hollow anymore. I tape photos of my pottery to my wall. Underneath them, a note reads, "These aren't remnants. They're works of art. I don't need an apology anymore. I don't need anyone to validate the pain I lived. I just need my own hands, still shaping, still creating, still alive." I used to live in houses where the walls held everyone else. Photos of my sister, my cousin's awards, my parents' wedding portrait. Never me. Not even once. Each frame whispered, "You're just a guest." But now, for the first time, my walls tell a single story, and it's mine. I got my first apartment in West Seattle on a rainy October day. Small studio, chipped walls, old wooden floor. But I could breathe. No more whispering to avoid upsetting someone. No more dodging eyes. No more smiling just to be the good daughter. The day I moved in, I brought 3 suitcases, an old bag, some ceramics, and me. No family photos. No unopened birthday cards. I arrived like stepping onto blank canvas, and this time I would be the first color. I started painting, not for others to hang, but for me to see every single day. I painted my own face, no makeup, no curls, no posing to support someone else's spotlight. I painted my hands, the same hands that once trembled while typing apologies for things I didn't even do. I painted a house with no doors, no locks, because I wasn't building a prison out of old expectations anymore. A friend came to visit. She looked at the portrait I hung right in the center of the room and asked, "How'd you dare to do this?" I said, "Because for too many years I didn't dare." I don't need my walls to tell cheating wife stories that don't belong to me. I don't need to replay stories cheating that were stamped on the backs of the women in my family, only for their daughters to grow up paying a debt they never owed. I don't tell cheating like it's some tabloid scandal. I tell it like a crack that runs through the bloodline, from mothers to daughters, from lies to silence. And I won't bow my head to it anymore. I built myself a tiny desk. On it, I placed a photo of me laughing, not posed, not staged. I taped notes to the wall. No one's writing the story for me. No one teaches you to love yourself. You learn alone. I no longer need to prove I deserve space on someone's wall. I don't need a spot in the family gallery anymore. I made a home where no one gets cropped out of the photo, where no one says, "That little sister who ruined the wedding dress," and deletes her from the album, where the true infidelity story isn't about who cheated on whom, but who stopped being honest with themselves. The first night I slept there, I didn't cry, not because I wasn't sad, but because for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for grieving the wrong way, for acting the wrong way, for existing the wrong way. The apartment was small, but it held all of me, every piece, every line. It didn't have to be beautiful to anyone else. It just had to remind me, I'm not hiding anymore. The day I left, no one said goodbye. I used to believe blood would keep people close, but some blood ties leave you behind in silence, while strangers pray your name into memory. Family isn't the people who share your DNA. It's the ones who keep you alive in their thoughts when the world wants to erase you. No texts. No calls, not even a wish for good luck. I became a blank space in the family drama stories they told, a name crossed off the birthday list, a person tucked away in the drawer labeled "Don't Mention." I thought I wouldn't survive that kind of silence. But then came people who didn't ask for explanations. They just said, "I see you." And in a world that tried to forget me, those 3 words opened a door. Jess, my friend from pottery class, let me crash for 3 nights when I had no bed. Luis, the cafe owner where I worked part-time, handed me his old coffee maker and a radio. Rosa, my upstairs neighbor, rang my doorbell every time she made empanadas. Take a few while they're hot. No one knew the whole infidelity story from my family. No one pushed me to tell. They just let me exist, whole, unnamed, unjudged. I used to think family revenge stories were about proving I didn't need them, that I had to rise so high they'd regret losing me. But human revenge is quieter, deeper. When you choose to live fully, kindly, without bitterness weighing down your ribs. One night I got a fever, too weak to walk. Rosa knocked, handed me a bowl of soup and 2 Tylenol. She didn't ask questions, just said, You're not alone. I stood there, tears not from pain, but from being seen in my weakness. No mask, no performance. Just me, allowed to not be okay. I started printing photos. Me laughing with Jess. Me at a picnic with my pottery group. Me at my window with Louise coffee in hand. I hung them up, not to erase the past, but to frame a new family. The ones who never let me vanish. Family is someone who says your name when you've forgotten who you are. Family sees the cracks and says, this part needs more love. And even if blood relatives return, with apologies, with guilt, with maybe love, I won't be waiting there. I'm in a home where family isn't sorted by genes. Here, anyone who loves me through action gets a place at the table. I don't forget what I lost. I just won't let it write my future. And for the first time in my life, I'm not waiting for anyone to speak my name. I've carved it into the world, with hands that no longer shake. I used to think forgiveness was a gift you gave the one who hurt you, so I held my anger like hot coal in my hand. But the longer I held on, the deeper it burned. I didn't forgive them because they deserved peace. I forgave them because I deserved rest. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it just stops it from owning your future. That night, I stayed up till 3 a.m. Not working, not partying, just lying there, staring at the ceiling, replaying one tired question. Why did they do that to me? I had heard enough of those polished family tales. All smiles and Sunday dresses, all pretend. I was the part they cropped out, the one who couldn't fake it well enough to make the frame. And I had dreamed of burning revenge, me showing up shining, untouchable, glorious, just to watch them choke on regret. But the truth hit me harder than any fantasy. They were already asleep, living their lives, unbothered, while I was still wide awake, holding on to family betrayal like it was a pillow I couldn't put down. I wrote speeches I never gave, had fake arguments where I finally got the last word. I replayed the betrayals like reruns, always hoping this time I'd change the ending. And yet, mornings still felt heavy. My chest still tight, my hands still cold. That's when I realized revenge isn't always victory. Sometimes, real victory is when you don't even want revenge anymore. So, I wrote a letter, never mailed it. I needed to bleed the fire out of my chest. I named names, not to curse them, but to release them. I couldn't forget, but I stopped remembering just to hurt myself. Forgiveness wasn't because they earned relief. It was because I refused to spend my whole life proving I shouldn't have trusted them. I cleaned my room, tossed the notes full of spiteful words I'd scribbled at 2 a.m., replaced them with a single quote pinned to the wall. You don't have to be perfect today. Just be lighter. I started reading things I wrote back when I still believed in softness. And I saw it. The version of me that still had space for love, still knew how to trust. Not for them, for me. One day, I walked past a used bookstore and froze. On the cover of a dusty paperback was this line: forgiveness is not an apology. It's a release. I didn't check the author. I just bought the book because I needed to let go. Since that day, I've never written another word about them. No more dragging their wrongdoings behind me like war medals. Now I write about me, not the victim, not the survivor, but the woman who is alive and living. That night, for the first time in months, I slept straight through. No nightmares, no desperate dreams of escape. Just me, in my little room, not burning, not raging, but warm, because I had finally forgiven. Not for them, for me, the one who chose to keep walking, without carrying ashes anymore. I used to live for praise, live to hear my name called. But every time they remembered me, I was an afterthought. After my sister's dress, after my mother's dish, after the forced laughter. Now I don't need an invitation to walk into a room because I know I have the right to be there. And that is enough. I didn't attend the family reunion that year. Not because I was busy, not because I was angry, but because I stopped being the one waiting to be invited. Years ago, if I didn't see my name on the list, I'd cry. I'd send a long message, apologizing for being distant last year. I'd buy a gift beyond my means, hoping it would earn me a spot again. I used to think love was praise, that it came with well done, or you showed up too. I thought my presence needed permission, validation, a reason to exist. I grew up inside family tales where I had no role. I was the background, so they could shine. The shadow, so they could glow. They told cheating stories about outsiders, never noticing how they betrayed their own daughter with silence, with eyes that never really looked at me. I used to dream of revenge stories, of showing up in a red dress, bold lipstick, achievements blazing, making everyone pause in shock. But there's something stronger than hidden revenge. It's when you stop needing to prove you deserve to be seen. I didn't attend the reunion, but I still made dinner for myself. A small table, a bouquet I bought for me, a mirror across from my seat so I could see me. I poured wine, raised my glass, not because I was invited, but because I deserved to be here in my own life. You know what? I used to believe I wasn't enough, not talented, not memorable. But then I looked at my life, at what I'd built from scratch. I have friends who speak my name when I need it most. I have a tiny apartment, touched in every corner by my hands. I have a story that doesn't need drama, only truth. My hidden revenge doesn't explode in fireworks. It lives in the quiet gratitude that I never gave up, that I still choose to show up, even when no one's watching. You don't need a formal invite to be worthy. You don't need praise to make love real. I'm still here, not loud, not flashy, but steady, like this little home, like the soft smile I wear when I stand in the kitchen no one sees. And know this, I don't need to enter their story, because I'm writing mine. No spotlight required, just my own gaze and the truth that I am enough. I once believed that leaving meant betrayal, but staying was the bigger betrayal, one against myself. Every day I remained, I silenced a part of my truth. Leaving wasn't cutting ties. It was ending the performance of being okay. I didn't leave because I stopped loving them. I left because I finally started loving myself. I didn't walk away because I was hurt. I walked away because I finally saw the truth. If I stayed one more day, I wouldn't be myself anymore. Some infidelity stories aren't about marriage. They live in mother-daughter relationships, where trust is torn apart not by yelling, but by chosen silence. Some betrayal stories don't leave bruises or tears. They show up in the way someone looks through you when all you needed was to be seen. They sound like a door, quietly closing while your hand is still reaching out. I used to wait for them to change. Waited for the moment they'd call my name again. At the dinner table, in the photo album, in a speech that made room for me. I waited so long that I couldn't hear my own voice anymore. Then one day I walked out the door. Not because I was angry, but because I finally chose to protect myself. I didn't take much. Just a bag of clothes, a notebook, and my voice. That voice I had once quieted so others could feel comfortable. I rented a small third-floor room in an old building. No one knew my name, and no one asked who I had left behind. That space became the first page of a new story, mine. I documented everything, from screwing in shelves by myself, to standing in front of the mirror and not hating what I saw. Not because I had healed, but because I was living honestly without armor. One day, in a quiet park, an older woman looked at me and asked, "You just left a place that didn't feel like yours, didn't you?" I nodded. She said, "Then don't look back. Not because they were wrong, but because your heart has already said enough." I had heard so many versions of a true infidelity story, but this was the first time I understood what it meant to cheat on myself, and what it meant to forgive myself by walking away. Some called me selfish. Some called me weak. But I know this. Leaving isn't betrayal. It's the bravest decision I've made not to continue a pattern passed down to me. I no longer live to uphold a perfect family image. I live to stop betraying the peace within me. And that first night in my new space, I took a black marker and wrote one sentence on the wall. I'm not running away. I'm returning to myself. I don't need everyone to understand. I just need every step I take to stop stepping over my own heart. I don't need to be held back by blood. I need to be held by kindness, by love, and when those aren't offered, I will keep walking. Not out of coldness, but because I've finally learned. Real love never keeps you in place through fear.